Step away from the vehicle. You're being detained.
For what crime, officer? Shopping while black?
I don't need your attitude. I need your ID. Now.
You have no reasonable suspicion. Terry v. Ohio. Look at the receipt.
Turn around. You are not free to go.
My name is Eleanor Vance. This is an unlawful detention.
The dashcam video didn't lie, but it also didn't tell the whole story. Not at first. It just showed a bright, blinding Tuesday afternoon in Arlington, Virginia. The sun was high, baking the asphalt of the Whole Foods parking lot, reflecting off the polished hoods of luxury sedans and family SUVs. And there, right in the center of the frame, was a woman who had spent 30 years putting bad guys behind bars about to be treated like one herself. Before we get into the details of a lawsuit that would bankrupt a police department's insurance policy and ruin a young officer's life, I need you to take a second. Look at where you are right now. Are you safe? Do you know your rights? Because Eleanor Vance knew hers better than anyone within 100 miles, and it didn't stop what was about to happen. If you believe that justice should be blind but never foolish, hit that like button. You're going to want to see how this ends. Eleanor Vance was 54 years old, and she didn't look like a woman who carried a federal badge. She looked like a grandmother or a retired school teacher. She was dressed in a beige linen suit, sensible walking shoes, and a silk scarf tied loosely around her neck. She moved with the slow, deliberate grace of someone who had survived back surgery 2 years prior and knew the value of caution. But beneath that soft exterior was a mind sharpened by 3 decades in the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division. Eleanor wasn't just an investigator. She was a section chief. She had overseen task forces that dismantled corrupt sheriff's departments in Mississippi and prosecuted hate crimes in Idaho. She had sat across interrogation tables from skinheads, corrupt mayors, and killers, and she had never blinked. Today, however, she wasn't hunting federal fugitives. She was hunting for organic produce and expensive imported cheese. It was 2:15 p.m. Eleanor had taken a half-day off to prepare for her sister's anniversary dinner. She had spent 40 minutes inside the store carefully selecting her items. She had paid with her debit card at Register 4. She had the receipt tucked securely into the side pocket of her purse. She pushed her cart toward her silver Lexus SUV, humming a low tune, enjoying the warmth of the sun on her face. She popped the trunk, the hydraulic lift hissing softly, and began to arrange her reusable canvas bags in the cargo area. It was the most mundane, innocent activity imaginable. Watching her from 50 yards away was Officer Kyle Brannigan. At 29 years old, Brannigan was a man who wore his uniform a little too tight and his sunglasses a little too dark. He had been with the force for 6 years, and in that time he had developed a reputation. His sergeant called him proactive. The public defenders called him a liability. Brannigan didn't like slow days. He didn't like sitting in his cruiser watching traffic flow smoothly. He liked action. He liked the feeling of control that came with the badge. He was parked in a shaded spot, ostensibly writing a report, but his eyes were scanning the lot. He saw Eleanor. He didn't see a federal investigator. He didn't see a taxpayer. He saw a black woman loading expensive groceries into a luxury car that cost more than his annual salary. In Brannigan's mind, the math didn't add up. The bias that had been simmering in his subconscious, the same bias that had led to 4 citizen complaints in the last 18 months, clicked into gear. He watched her lift a heavy bag. He saw her look around the parking lot, a natural instinct for a woman alone, but to Brannigan it looked like casing. It looked like guilt. He convinced himself in that split second that she hadn't paid. He told himself she had bypassed the registers, or maybe she had pulled the old bottom-of-the-cart trick. He didn't check with the store. He didn't radio dispatch to ask if there were reports of theft. He just put his cruiser in drive. The Ford Explorer rumbled as he pulled out of the spot. He didn't turn on his lights or siren. He wanted to catch her by surprise. He wanted to see the panic in her eyes when he rolled up. He cruised slowly down the lane, the tires crunching on gravel, and pulled up diagonally behind Eleanor's Lexus, blocking her in. Eleanor paused, a bag of artichokes in her hand. She looked at the police cruiser blocking her path. She didn't feel fear. She felt annoyance. She checked her watch. She was on a schedule. She watched as the door of the cruiser opened and Officer Brannigan stepped out. He adjusted his belt, hitching it up, and placed his hand on the butt of his service weapon. It wasn't drawn, but the threat was there. It was a power stance designed to intimidate. "Stay right there," Brannigan called out, his voice carrying over the noise of distant traffic. Eleanor set the bag down gently in the trunk. She turned to face him, her hands empty and visible. She had trained hundreds of agents on how to handle confrontation. She knew exactly what was happening. "Can I help you, officer?" she asked. Her voice was calm, the voice of a woman who was used to commanding boardrooms. "I said, stay right there," Brannigan repeated, walking closer, invading her personal space. "Step away from the trunk and keep your hands where I can see them." "My hands are visible." "Officer," Eleanor said, "I'm loading my groceries. Is there a problem?" "We'll see," Brannigan sneered. "We've had a lot of theft in this area recently. High-end goods walking out the front door." Eleanor stared at him. "And you believe I'm involved in theft?" "I think you need to explain why you're loading a whole lot of expensive merchandise into a car that—" "Well, let's just say I want to see some proof of purchase." The accusation hung in the hot afternoon air. It was baseless. It was insulting. And for Kyle Brannigan, it was the beginning of the end. The air in the parking lot seemed to grow heavier, the humidity spiking as the tension between the two figures intensified. Eleanor Vance stood her ground, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She had seen men like Kyle Brannigan before. She had seen them in Alabama in the 90s. She had seen them in Chicago in the 2000s. The uniform changed, the cities changed, but the look in their eyes, that mix of arrogance and insecurity, was always the same. "Officer," Eleanor said, her tone dropping an octave, becoming more authoritative. "I have just purchased these items. The receipt is in my purse, which is sitting on the front seat of my vehicle. I am happy to retrieve it for you to resolve this misunderstanding immediately." Brannigan shook his head, a tight, dismissive smile playing on his lips. "No, you're not reaching into that car. You're not reaching for anything. You step away from the vehicle. Now." Eleanor didn't move. "I am not stepping away from my property. You are detaining me. For a detention to be lawful, you need reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is about to be committed. Terry v. Ohio. What is your articulable reasonable suspicion, officer?" Brannigan blinked. He hadn't expected a citation of case law. Most people he stopped stuttered or cried or got angry and shouted. They didn't quote Supreme Court decisions. But instead of pausing to consider that he might be out of his depth, Brannigan felt a surge of anger. He took it as a challenge. "Don't quote law to me, lady," Brannigan snapped, stepping closer until he was just 3 feet away from her. "My suspicion is that you're acting nervous. You're being argumentative, and you fit the description of a shoplifting suspect we've been looking for." "Which description?" Eleanor asked sharply. "Be specific. Height, weight, clothing, or is the description just black woman in a grocery store?" "Watch your mouth," Brannigan warned. "I'm conducting an investigation. I don't need to explain myself to you. Now for the last time, step to the curb." "I have the receipt," Eleanor said again, gesturing with her head toward the open driver's side window. "It is right there. If you look, you will see the Whole Foods logo and today's date. It will take you 10 seconds to verify." "I'm not interested in a piece of paper you could have picked up off the ground." Brannigan said, his logic crumbling but his resolve hardening. "I'm interested in why you're resisting a lawful order. I need your ID, driver's license, now." "I am not resisting," Eleanor stated clearly. "I am asserting my rights." "I am under no obligation to provide identification unless I am being lawfully detained or arrested. Since you have no reasonable suspicion, this encounter is consensual and I am choosing to end it. I am going to close my trunk and get in my car." She reached for the handle of the trunk. "Don't you do it," Brannigan yelled. His hand tightened on his holster. "You are not free to go, you are detained." "For what crime?" Eleanor demanded, her voice rising for the first time, not in fear, but in command. "For suspicion of grand larceny," Brannigan shouted back. "And now for obstruction. You want to play lawyer? We can play lawyer downtown. I'm going to need to search this vehicle. I need to inventory the stolen goods." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. This was the line. The Fourth Amendment was not a suggestion to Eleanor Vance. It was a sacred text she had spent her life defending. "You will not search my vehicle," she said, enunciating every word with crystal clarity. "I do not consent to any searches. You do not have probable cause. You do not have a warrant. If you enter my vehicle, you are violating my civil rights under color of law, Title 18 United States Code, Section 242. Brannigan laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "Section 242? You watch too much TV. I have probable cause because you're acting like a criminal. You're refusing to cooperate. That gives me everything I need." "Refusal to waive constitutional rights is not probable cause," Eleanor shot back. "Arizona versus Gant. You are making a mistake that is going to cost you your badge, officer. I am asking you as a fellow officer of the law to stop and think." "Fellow officer," Brannigan scoffed. "What, you a security guard at the mall? You think that makes us peers?" "I am not a security guard," Eleanor said. "I am a federal investigator with the Department of Justice." The silence that followed should have been the moment Brannigan walked away. It should have been the moment he apologized. But his pride was too far gone. He looked at the middle-aged woman in the linen suit, looked at her groceries, and decided she was lying. "Yeah," Brannigan said. "And I'm the director of the FBI. Turn around." The confrontation had spilled out of the realm of a quiet misunderstanding and into the public theater. Shoppers pushing carts full of organic kale and almond milk were stopping. The suburban quiet was broken by the raised voices. A young woman in yoga pants pulled out her iPhone. A man in a business suit stopped near his BMW and started recording. Brannigan noticed the audience, and instead of checking his behavior, he performed for them. He puffed his chest out further. He needed to show these people that he was in control, that he was the law. "Ma'am, turn around and place your hands on the vehicle," Brannigan ordered. Eleanor didn't turn. She looked directly at the woman filming. "My name is Eleanor Vance," she said loudly, addressing the camera. "I am a federal agent. This officer is detaining me without probable cause. He has refused to look at my receipt. He is attempting an unlawful search." "Stop talking to the bystanders," Brannigan barked. He moved around her, positioning himself between Eleanor and the open driver's door. He was agitated now, his face flushing red. "You are interfering with a police investigation. I am the subject of your harassment, not an interference," Eleanor replied. "Officer, look at my purse, the black leather tote on the passenger seat. My credentials are in the inside zipper pocket. My badge number is 4922. Call your dispatch. Ask them to verify DOJ status for Eleanor Vance. Do it before you touch me." Brannigan glanced at the purse through the window. He saw it. But checking it meant admitting he might be wrong. Checking it meant taking an order from a suspect. "I'm not calling anyone," Brannigan said. "You're stalling. You're making up stories. Impersonating a federal officer is a federal crime. You know that? That's a felony. You just added another charge to your list." "It is not impersonation if it is the truth," Eleanor said. "You are willfully ignoring exculpatory evidence. You are violating policy. What is your badge number? I can't read it from here." Brannigan covered his badge with his hand, instinctively a childish gesture of defiance. "You don't need my number. You need to turn around." "I will not turn around," Eleanor said. "I am not a threat to you. I am unarmed. I am a 54-year-old woman with a spinal condition. I am telling you for the third time to look at the receipt." The crowd was murmuring now. "Just look at the receipt, officer," the man in the suit yelled out. "It's right there. Why won't you look at it?" "Back up!" Brannigan shouted at the crowd, pointing a finger at them. "Everyone back up. This is an active crime scene." "It's a parking lot," someone else shouted. "She's just buying groceries." Brannigan felt the situation slipping away. He felt the heat of the eyes on him. He needed to end this. He needed to put her in cuffs to validate his actions. In his mind, an arrest justified the stop. If he arrested her, he could search the car incident to arrest. He could find the stolen goods. He could find something, anything, to make this stick. "Okay, have it your way," Brannigan said. He reached for his radio on his shoulder. "Dispatch, send me a backup unit to the Whole Foods on Clarendon. I have a non-compliant female suspect refusing to identify possible 10 to 16. 10, 16, Eleanor repeated, shaking her head. "Domestic disturbance. You are calling this a domestic disturbance to get a faster response time. That is a false report." "It's a disturbance," Brannigan yelled, "and you're causing it." He dropped his hand from the radio and lunged. He didn't warn her. He didn't say, "You are under arrest," first. He just moved. He grabbed Eleanor's left wrist, his grip hard and punishing. Eleanor gasped. "Do not touch me. I have a prior injury." "Stop resisting!" Brannigan screamed for the benefit of the cameras. Eleanor wasn't resisting. She was standing still, her body rigid with shock. But Brannigan needed the narrative. He yanked her arm behind her back, twisting it up toward her shoulder blades. A sharp, tearing pain shot through Eleanor's shoulder. It was the rotator cuff she had rehabilitated for 6 months. She felt something pop. She cried out a sound of genuine agony. "You are hurting me," she yelled. "My shoulder, I am not resisting. Tell it to the judge." Brannigan grunted. He kicked her legs apart, forcing her off balance, and slammed her chest against the hot metal of her own car. The bystanders screamed. The woman filming moved closer, shouting, "She's not fighting you, stop it!" But Brannigan was in the tunnel now. He fumbled for his handcuffs, his breathing heavy. He slapped the metal onto Eleanor's left wrist, then grabbed her right arm and wrenched it back. Eleanor bit her lip to keep from screaming again as the second cuff clicked. The cold steel bit into her skin. She was handcuffed. A section chief of the Department of Justice standing in a Whole Foods parking lot, handcuffed by a patrolman who hadn't even looked at her receipt. The click of the handcuffs was the sound of a career ending, though Officer Brannigan didn't know it yet. He only felt the adrenaline of the capture. He had won. He had subdued the threat. He spun Eleanor around, grabbing her by her upper arm, right on the injury, and marched her toward his cruiser. "You have the right to remain silent." Brannigan recited, breathless reciting the Miranda warning with a mix of aggression and triumph. "Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Eleanor stumbled, her expensive shoes scraping against the pavement. The pain in her shoulder was a white-hot lance of fire, making her vision blur. But her mind was cold. Her mind was a steel trap snapping shut. She stopped speaking to Brannigan. There was no point. He was no longer a person to reason with. He was a defendant. She shifted into preservation mode. She memorized the time, 2:24 p.m. She memorized the faces of the witnesses. She noted that he had not double-locked the handcuffs, and they were tightening with every movement, cutting off circulation. "Get in." Brannigan shoved her toward the back seat of the Explorer. The plastic seat was hard, the space cramped. Eleanor had to contort her body to slide in the pain in her shoulder, bringing tears to her eyes. She didn't wipe them away. She let them fall. They were evidence of pain and suffering. Brannigan slammed the door. The sound was final. He walked back to her car. The crowd was yelling at him now. "You can't leave her car open," the man in the suit yelled. "Her purse is in there." Brannigan ignored him. He looked into Eleanor's car. He saw the purse. He saw the receipt sitting on the dashboard where she had said it was. He paused for a fraction of a second. A smarter man would have looked at it. A smarter man would have realized the mistake and let her go right there. But Brannigan grabbed the purse and threw it into the front seat of his cruiser. He wasn't going to check it now. He was going to book it as evidence. He locked Eleanor's car and pocketed her keys. He got into the driver's seat of his patrol car. The air conditioning was blasting. He looked in the rear-view mirror. Eleanor was sitting perfectly straight, eyes forward, not looking at him. "You comfortable back there?" Brannigan asked, mocking her. "Not so talkative now, huh?" Eleanor said nothing. She was reciting the elements of a 1983 claim in her head. Deprivation of rights under color of law, excessive force, false arrest, malicious prosecution, and the drive to the precinct took 15 minutes. Brannigan drove fast, weaving through traffic using his siren at intersections just to cut through. He was high on the power. He radioed ahead. "One female in custody. Grand larceny resisting impersonating an officer." "Copy that, Brannigan," the dispatch crackled back. When they pulled into the sally port of the precinct, the garage door rolled down, sealing them inside the concrete belly of the station. Brannigan hauled Eleanor out of the car. Her legs were stiff. Her shoulder was throbbing with a dull, sickening ache. He marched her through the heavy steel doors into the processing area. It smelled of industrial cleaner, stale coffee and misery. Several other officers were milling about. They looked up. They saw a well-dressed older black woman in handcuffs and a linen suit. It wasn't the typical look of a shoplifter, but they didn't question it. They trusted the uniform. "Got a live one?" Brannigan announced, pushing Eleanor toward the booking bench. "Tried to walk out of Whole Foods with half the store, then tried to tell me she was a Fed." A few officers chuckled. "Yeah, I had the Queen of England in here last week," one joked. "Name?" The booking sergeant. A man named Thomas Kowalski didn't look up from his computer screen. Kowalski was 58, 2 years away from retirement. He had seen everything. He was tired. "She refused to give it," Brannigan said. "Jane Doe for now." "I am not Jane Doe," Eleanor said. Her voice was parched but steady. "My name is Eleanor Vance. I need you to remove these handcuffs immediately due to a medical emergency with my shoulder, and I need you to retrieve my credentials from my purse, which Officer Brannigan seized." Kowalski looked up. He looked at Eleanor. He looked at her clothes. He looked at her eyes. He didn't see a junkie. He didn't see a thief. He saw dignity. "She claiming she's DOJ," Brannigan laughed, throwing Eleanor's purse onto the counter. "Check it. Probably a fake badge she bought online." Kowalski pulled the purse toward him. He opened it. He saw the wallet. He pulled it out. He flipped it open. The room went silent. It wasn't a fake. It was the heavy leather-bound commission of a special agent and section chief of the United States Department of Justice. The gold badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The photo ID was unmistakable. Eleanor Vance, Civil Rights Division. Kowalski stared at the badge. He stared at Brannigan. His face went pale, draining of all color until he looked like a ghost. "Brannigan," Kowalski whispered, his voice trembling. "What did you do?" "What?" Brannigan asked, confused by the reaction. "It's fake, right?" Kowalski stood up slowly. "Uncuff her. Now. Sarge, she. Uncuff her. Right now." Kowalski roared, his voice echoing off the concrete walls. "You idiot! You absolute idiot!" The scream from Sergeant Kowalski shattered the casual atmosphere of the booking room. Every officer froze. The typewriters stopped clacking. The banter died instantly. Brannigan recoiled as if he'd been slapped. He looked at the sergeant, then at the badge on the counter, then back at Eleanor. The realization hit him like a physical blow to the gut. The arrogance drained out of his face, replaced by a dawn of horror. He fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking so badly he dropped them on the floor. The sound of the keys hitting the linoleum was deafening in the silence. "Pick them up," Eleanor said. She didn't shout. She didn't scream. She spoke with the icy finality of a judge passing a death sentence. Brannigan scrambled to pick up the keys. He approached Eleanor, his bravado gone. He reached for her wrists. "Gently," Kowalski warned, coming around the desk. "If you hurt her again, I swear to God, Brannigan." The cuffs clicked open. Eleanor brought her arms forward slowly. She hissed in pain as her shoulder joint rotated back into position. Her left wrist was bleeding where the metal had cut the skin. Her right hand was swollen. She didn't rub them. She held them out for Kowalski to see. "Photograph these," Eleanor ordered. "Now." "Ma'am, Kowalski stammered. "I am so sorry. I don't know what—" "I said photograph them," Eleanor repeated. "This is evidence. Do you have a camera, Sergeant? Or do I need to call the FBI to come process this scene?" "Get the camera!" Kowalski yelled at a rookie officer in the corner. The rookie scrambled. Brannigan backed away, retreating until his back hit the cinderblock wall. I thought she was... She fit the description." "Shut up," Kowalski snapped. "Don't say another word. You have the right to remain silent, and I suggest you use it." Eleanor walked to the counter. She picked up her wallet and credentials. She didn't put them away. She laid them out side by side. "I want the watch commander," Eleanor said. "I want the chief of police, and I want a medical evaluation for this shoulder, in that order." "I'll call Captain Miller," Kowalski said, reaching for the phone. His hand was shaking too. He knew what this meant. This wasn't just a lawsuit. This was a federal investigation. This was the Department of Justice coming down on their heads. 10 minutes later, the heavy doors swung open. Captain Miller walked in. He was a tall man, 50 years old, with graying hair and a politician's smile that vanished the moment he saw Eleanor Vance. He had already been briefed by Kowalski on the phone. He knew exactly who she was. He had read her legal opinions in training manuals. "Agent Vance," Miller said, walking toward her with his hands open, palms up. "I am Captain Miller. I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for this terrible misunderstanding. Please come to my office. Let's get you some water. Let's get you comfortable." "I am not here for comfort, Captain," Eleanor said, standing in the middle of the booking room. And this was not a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is when you forget to buy milk. This was an unlawful detention, a violation of the Fourth Amendment, an assault, a battery, and a deprivation of civil rights under color of law. Miller winced. "I understand you're upset." "I am not upset," Eleanor corrected him. "I am building a case. Is that officer disarmed?" She pointed at Brannigan, who was still standing against the wall, looking like a child who had broken a priceless vase. Miller looked at Brannigan. "Brannigan, give me your badge and your gun." "Cap, come on," Brannigan pleaded, his voice cracking. "She refused to show ID. I was just following procedure." "Procedure?" Eleanor stepped toward him. "Show me the procedure that allows you to arrest a citizen for shopping while black. Show me the procedure that allows you to ignore a receipt. Show me the procedure that allows you to dislocate the shoulder of a compliant subject." "Badge and gun, Brannigan," Miller barked. "Now place them on the counter." Brannigan slowly unholstered his weapon. He unpinned his badge. He placed them on the booking counter next to Eleanor's credentials. The contrast was stark. The symbol of his authority lay next to the symbol of the authority he had unknowingly attacked. "You are relieved of duty pending an internal investigation," Miller said. "Go home." "I can't go home," Brannigan said, looking at Eleanor. "She has my car keys." Eleanor didn't smile. "No, I have my car keys. You have a long walk ahead of you." The walk to Captain Miller's office was the longest walk of Miller's career. He ushered Eleanor inside and offered her the leather chair usually reserved for the mayor or high-ranking donors. Eleanor declined. She remained standing, favoring her injured shoulder. "Agent Vance, please." Miller tried again. "Let me call a paramedic. We can have you transported to the ER immediately." "I have already called my own physician," Eleanor said, "and my attorney, and the Assistant Attorney General." Miller paled at the mention of the AAG. "Agent Vance, look. Officer Brannigan is... He's a problem. We know that. We've been trying to deal with him. But this, we can handle this internally. We can make this right. We can drop all charges immediately. Drop the charges. Eleanor let out a short, incredulous laugh. Captain, there are no charges. There never were. You cannot drop something that never legally existed. But I will be filing charges, and I am issuing a verbal preservation order right now. I want the dash cam footage from Brannigan's cruiser. I want the body cam footage from every officer who arrived on the scene. I want the booking room video from the last 45 minutes. I want the dispatch logs. If 1 second of that footage goes missing, I will personally see to it that you are named as a co-conspirator in the federal indictment. Miller nodded rapidly. Nothing will go missing. I give you my word. We will preserve everything. Good, Eleanor said, because I'm not just coming for Brannigan. I'm coming for the department. You said you knew he was a problem. That means you had constructive notice. That means you kept a dangerous officer on the street because it was inconvenient to fire him. That makes the city liable. Monell vs. Department of Social Services. Failure to train. Failure to supervise. She was reciting the legal framework of their destruction. Miller knew she was right. They had ignored the red flags with Brannigan. The complaints about aggressive stops, the racial disparities in his arrest records. They had swept it under the rug. And now the rug was being pulled out by a woman who knew exactly where the dirt was hidden. What do you want, Agent Vance? Miller asked, his voice defeated. I want my car returned to me, Eleanor said. I want to ride back to Whole Foods to retrieve it, and then I want you to prepare for the storm. An hour later, Eleanor was back in the parking lot. Her shoulder was in a sling provided by the paramedics who had treated her at the station. She stood by her Lexus. The groceries were still in the trunk, likely spoiled by the heat. The crowd was gone, but the ghost of the incident remained. She didn't cry until she was inside her car with the doors locked. She leaned her head against the steering wheel and let the tears come not from sadness, but from rage. The pain in her arm was a constant reminder. She thought about her son. She thought about her grandson, who was 17 and just learning to drive. If Brannigan had stopped her grandson, he wouldn't have had a DOJ badge. He wouldn't have known case law. He might have panicked. He might have reached for his phone. And Brannigan might have shot him. That thought dried her tears instantly. This wasn't about her. It was about the ones who couldn't fight back. She started the engine. She wasn't going to her sister's anniversary dinner. She was going to her office. She had work to do. The lawsuit hit the city attorney's desk 3 days later, like a tactical nuke. Vance v. Brannigan et al. It was 50 pages of devastating legal prose. It didn't just allege misconduct. It documented a systemic culture of racial profiling and excessive force within the department. The discovery phase was a bloodbath. Eleanor's legal team, led by a shark of a civil rights attorney named Marcus Thorne, subpoenaed everything. They got Brannigan's personnel file. It was a horror show. 12 complaints in 6 years. 4 for excessive force, 8 for racial profiling. All of them unsubstantiated by internal affairs. But the smoking gun was the body cam footage. When the video was released to the public, it didn't just go viral. It became a cultural moment. The image of the calm, well-dressed black woman standing in the sunlight, politely offering a receipt, contrasted with the screaming, aggressive young white officer, was impossible to ignore. The audio was crystal clear. I am not a security guard. I am a federal investigator. The internet exploded. #Agent Vance trended for weeks. Legal experts went on CNN and Fox News to break down the footage. They all agreed it was the most clear-cut case of Fourth Amendment violation they had ever seen. He didn't even look at the receipt, a pundit screamed on primetime television. It was right there. It's not about the groceries. It's about the power trip. The city attorney, a man named Harold Green, watched the footage with his head in his hands. He looked at the polling numbers. He looked at the potential jury pool. We can't go to trial, Green told the mayor. If we put Eleanor Vance on the stand in a sling with her resume, the jury will give her the city key and half the budget. She's the perfect plaintiff. She's impeccable. She's law enforcement, so we can't claim she hates cops. She's black, so the racial bias is undeniable. She's older, so the physical abuse looks even worse. "What's the number?" the mayor asked, looking out the window at the protesters gathering on the city hall lawn. "Start at $1 million, Green said, "and pray she accepts it." She didn't. Eleanor rejected the first offer of $1.2 million without even consulting her lawyer. "This isn't a lottery," she told Green in a deposition. "This is a penalty. Make it hurt." They found more dirt. They found text messages on Brannigan's phone where he bragged to other officers about hunting in the jungle, referring to the minority neighborhoods. They found a text sent 20 minutes before the arrest. "Bored. Gonna find me a collar." It was over. The city knew it. The insurance carrier knew it. Officer Brannigan was fired 2 weeks after the video leaked. But that wasn't enough for Eleanor. She pushed the local prosecutor to file criminal charges: assault, false imprisonment, and then she called her old colleagues at the DOJ. The FBI opened a civil rights investigation into Brannigan. He was looking at federal prison time. The hunter had become the prey. 6 months after that sunny afternoon in the parking lot, the city of Arlington capitulated. They couldn't take the bad press anymore. They couldn't take the nightly news segments featuring Eleanor's calm, devastating interviews. The final settlement was historic $2.9 million. It was the largest payout for a single plaintiff in the department's history. But the money came with conditions Eleanor had insisted upon. First, the department had to implement mandatory quarterly implicit bias training, overseen by an independent body. Second, any officer with 3 complaints of bias in a year would be automatically placed on desk duty pending a citizen review. Third, Officer Brannigan would never be allowed to work in law enforcement again. Part of the agreement required the city to report his termination as gross misconduct to the National Decertification Index. On the day the settlement was signed, Eleanor sat in the conference room. Her shoulder had healed mostly, though it still ached when it rained. She signed the papers with her left hand, her right still a bit stiff. Officer Kyle Brannigan was not there. He was out on bail awaiting trial on federal charges of deprivation of rights under color of law. He was working at a landscaping company mowing lawns. He had lost his house. He had lost his wife. He had lost the only identity he ever cared about. Eleanor walked out of the city hall and down the steps. The press was waiting. Microphones were shoved in her face. Agent Vance, do you feel justice was served?" a reporter yelled. Eleanor stopped. She adjusted her silk scarf. She looked into the cameras. "Justice," she said, her voice steady and low, "would be me never having to meet Officer Brannigan. Justice would be loading my groceries in peace. This is just accountability. And accountability is expensive. It cost the taxpayers $2.9 million. It cost a young man his career. It cost me my peace of mind. But if it stops the next Brannigan from putting handcuffs on the next innocent woman, then it was a price we had to pay." She walked to her car, the same silver Lexus. She got in. She didn't drive to work. She drove to Whole Foods. She parked in the same spot. She walked in. She bought a gallon of milk and a loaf of bread. She paid at the register. She walked out to her car. She paused at the trunk. She looked around the parking lot. It was just a parking lot. Cars, pavement, sun. But it felt different now. The world felt different. She loaded her bags. No one stopped her. No one questioned her. She got in the driver's seat and locked the doors. She sat there for a long time, listening to the silence, listening to the beat of her own heart. She was a millionaire. She was a hero to millions. She was a legend in the legal community. But as she looked in the rearview mirror, she didn't see a hero. she saw a survivor. She saw a woman who knew that the badge in her purse was just a piece of metal, and that without it she was just another body in the crosshairs of a system that was broken. She started the car and drove away, leaving the empty space behind her. The silence in that car is something most people will never understand. It's the silence of knowing that your freedom, your dignity, and your life can be snatched away in a heartbeat by someone having a bad day and a badge. Eleanor Vance won. But how many lose? How many are sitting in a cell right now because they didn't know the case law, or they didn't have the credentials, or they just panicked? This story isn't just about a racist cop getting what he deserved. It's about the fragility of our rights. It's a reminder that authority without accountability is just tyranny with a uniform. What would you have done in Eleanor's shoes? Would you have kept your cool, or would you have fought back? And do you think $2.9 million is enough to pay for the trauma of being treated like a criminal in your own community? Let me know in the comments below. And if you believe that we need to keep watching the Watchers, hit that subscribe button. We're just getting started. Stay safe out there.
Step away from the vehicle. Hands on the roof. Now.
Officer, this is my car. I'm loading groceries. I've committed no crime.
We got a call. You fit the description. Turn around or I'll
You
make
have no probable cause. This is an unlawful detention.
Last warning. On the ground now.
Discharge that weapon and you will be assaulting a federal property.
Officer Kyle Rourke had been patrolling the streets of Richmond for 6 years when he made the decision that would implode his career and cost the city's taxpayers $4.1 million. At 32 years old, Rourke walked with the swagger of a man who believed the badge on his chest granted him immunity from consequence. He was known in the precinct for his proactive policing style, a euphemism his supervisors used in performance reviews to describe a pattern of aggression that bordered on harassment. He had received 7 prior complaints about his conduct, mostly involving rudeness and intimidation, but the police union had successfully argued them down to minor misunderstandings. Rourke had convinced himself that he possessed an instinct for sniffing out trouble, a sixth sense that was in reality little more than a collection of unexamined biases. He believed he was the thin blue line standing between order and chaos. He was about to find out that he was actually the chaos. Before we dive into the details of this catastrophic Tuesday afternoon, let me ask you, where are you tuning in from today? If you believe that accountability is the cornerstone of justice, please hit that subscribe button. We bring you these stories because the truth deserves a witness. It was 2:15 p.m. on a bright, unseasonably warm Tuesday in October. The sky was a piercing blue, the kind of autumn afternoon that makes people pause and appreciate the season. The parking lot of Oakwood Market, an upscale grocery store in the affluent West End district, was bustling. Oakwood Market was the sort of place where the produce was organic, the cheese was imported, and the clientele drove vehicles that cost more than most people's homes. Among them was Marcus Thorne. At 58 years old, Thorne was a man who commanded a room without raising his voice. He stood 6'2", with graying hair close-cropped and a posture that spoke of decades of discipline. He was wearing a charcoal gray bespoke suit, the jacket currently folded neatly over the passenger seat of his pristine black Cadillac Escalade. He had just finished a long morning in federal court and had stopped to pick up ingredients for an anniversary dinner he planned to cook for his wife. Marcus Thorne was not just a shopper. He was a senior prosecutor for the United States Department of Justice, a veteran of the legal system with 30 years of service. He had put away domestic terrorists, dismantled organized crime syndicates, and prosecuted corrupt politicians. His understanding of the law was encyclopedic, and his reputation in the federal courthouse was that of a man who was fair, meticulous, and absolutely unyielding when it came to the truth. Thorne was currently standing at the rear of his SUV, the liftgate open. He was methodically transferring brown paper grocery bags from his cart to the cargo area. He moved with the unhurried grace of a man who had nothing to hide and nowhere to run. He checked his watch, a vintage timepiece he'd bought after his first big case in the 90s, and calculated that he had plenty of time to get home and start the marinade. To anyone paying attention, Marcus Thorne looked exactly like what he was, a successful professional running an errand. But to Officer Kyle Rourke, who was idling his patrol car 2 streets away, and to the man watching from the manager's office of the Oakwood Market, Thorne was simply a suspect waiting to be identified. The stage was set for a collision between competence and arrogance, between the rule of law and the abuse of power. And it would all start with a phone call made by a man who couldn't imagine that a black man in a suit belonged in that parking lot. Silas Vance, the 38-year-old manager of Oakwood Market, prided himself on running a tight ship. He had been transferred to this location only 4 months prior and was desperate to prove his worth to the corporate owners. Vance was a man of nervous energy, constantly scanning security monitors and pacing the floor looking for problems where none existed. He viewed the wealthy, predominantly white clientele of the West End as his personal responsibility to protect. From the vantage point of his second-floor office window, Vance looked down at the parking lot, his eyes fixated on the black Escalade parked near the front. He saw Marcus Thorne loading groceries. Instead of seeing a customer, Vance saw an anomaly. In Vance's limited worldview, men who looked like Thorne didn't drive cars like that unless they were up to no good. "He's been there too long," Vance muttered to himself, though Thorne had been at his car for less than 3 minutes. Vance squinted. Was he loading groceries, or was he pretending to load groceries while casing the other high-end vehicles? Was that even his car? Vance didn't bother to check the transaction logs to see if a tall black man had just purchased $200 worth of steaks and wine. He didn't bother to go outside and ask a polite customer service question. Instead, he let his bias take the wheel. He picked up the phone and dialed the police non-emergency line, a number he had used 3 times that month already for suspicious individuals who turned out to be delivery drivers or contractors. "Dispatch, this is Silas Vance at Oakwood Market," he said, his voice tight with self-importance. "I need an officer out here. We have a suspicious male subject in the parking lot. He's loitering around the luxury vehicles looking into windows." The dispatcher, a woman with 20 years of experience, pressed for details. "Is he threatening anyone? Is he armed?" "No, I don't see a weapon," Vance said, embellishing the narrative as he spoke. "But he's acting very erratic. He's been out there for 20 minutes just standing by a black Escalade. I think he might be trying to break in, or maybe he's waiting to carjack someone. It's making my customers nervous." That was a lie. No customer had complained. The only person nervous was Vance. "We'll send a unit to check it out," the dispatcher said, logging the call as a suspicious person check. Officer Kyle Rourke heard the radio chatter. "Suspicious male, potential auto theft or casing vehicles, Oakwood Market." Rourke's ears perked up. Auto theft was a felony. This was a chance for a real arrest, something to spice up a boring Tuesday afternoon. He grabbed the mic. "Unit 4 Alpha. I'm 2 minutes out. I'll take it." As Rourke accelerated, his mind began to fill in the blanks of the dispatcher's report with his own prejudices. He wasn't picturing a senior prosecutor. He was picturing a career criminal. He pictured someone who would run someone who would fight. By the time he turned his cruiser into the Oakwood Market lot, his adrenaline was already spiking. He wasn't arriving to investigate. He was arriving to conquer. He scanned the rows of cars until he saw the black Escalade. He saw the tall figure standing at the back. Rourke didn't see the suit. He didn't see the grocery bags. He saw a target. He flipped on his lights, no siren, just the silent, blinding flash of blue and red, and stomped on the gas, bringing the cruiser to a screeching halt directly behind Thorne's SUV, effectively boxing him in. Do you think managers like Silas Vance should be held financially liable for making false reports based on bias? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Marcus Thorne paused, a bottle of olive oil in his hand, as the police cruiser skidded to a halt mere feet from his legs. The sudden aggression of the arrival was startling. He placed the bottle into the bag and turned slowly, his face a mask of calm curiosity. He had spent 30 years working alongside law enforcement. He respected the badge. But he also knew better than almost anyone how quickly bad policing could escalate a situation. Officer Rourke threw his door open and stepped out. He didn't adjust his belt or put on his hat. He marched toward Thorne with his hand resting ominously near his holstered sidearm. His body language was coiled, ready to spring. "Step away from the vehicle," Rourke barked, his voice loud enough to turn heads 3 rows away. Thorne didn't flinch. He remained standing by the open liftgate. "Good afternoon, officer. Is there a problem?" "I said step away from the vehicle now," Rourke shouted, closing the distance. "Get your hands where I can see them." Thorne held his hands up, palms open at chest level, a universal gesture of non-hostility. "My hands are visible, officer. I am simply loading my groceries. This is my vehicle." "Yeah, I've heard that before," Rourke sneered. He stopped 5 feet from Thorne, his eyes darting from Thorne's face to the interior of the SUV. "We got a call about a guy matching your description breaking into cars. Whose car is this, really?" Thorne's brow furrowed slightly. The absurdity of the accusation was almost laughable, but he knew the danger standing in front of him. "Officer, I just purchased these items inside. I have the receipt in my pocket. The registration for this vehicle is in the glove box, and it is registered to my name, Marcus Thorne. If you'll allow me—" "I didn't say you could move," Rourke interrupted, stepping closer, invading Thorne's personal space. "You don't reach for anything. You don't go into your pockets. You stand right there." "I'm standing right here," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice he used when cross-examining a hostile witness firm, authoritative and utterly controlled. "Officer, look at the situation. I am wearing a suit. I am loading bags of food. Does this look like a carjacking to you?" Rourke didn't like the tone. He didn't like being spoken to as an equal, let alone a superior. In his mind, suspects were supposed to be nervous, apologetic, or belligerent. Thorne was none of those things. He was dignified, and to Rourke that dignity felt like defiance. "I don't care what you're wearing," Rourke spat. "Smart criminals dress up. Turn around and face the car. Put your hands on the roof." "I will not," Thorne said simply. The air in the parking lot seemed to freeze. Several shoppers who had been loading their own cars stopped. A woman 2 cars down closed her trunk, slowly watching. "Excuse me?" Rourke asked, disbelief coloring his face. "I said I will not," Thorne repeated. "I have committed no crime. You have no probable cause to detain me. I have identified myself and offered proof of ownership. You are escalating a consensual encounter into an unlawful detention. You want to talk law with me?" Rourke laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "I'm the one with the badge, pal. You're the one suspected of a felony. Now, for the last time, turn around or I will make you turn around." Thorne looked Rourke in the eye. He was assessing the officer's mental state, calculating the odds. Rourke was young, agitated, and clearly not listening. "Officer, I am advising you to calm down. You are making a mistake that you cannot undo." The warning flew right over Officer Rourke's head. To him, Thorne's refusal to submit was a direct challenge to his authority. The adrenaline was pumping harder now, narrowing his vision until all he could see was the man in the suit who wouldn't obey. "That's it," Rourke growled. He took a step back and reached for his belt. "Let's see some ID, now. If this is your car, prove it." "I attempted to do that a moment ago," Thorne said, his patience thinning, but his composure intact. "My identification is in my breast pocket." Thorne moved his right hand slowly toward the inside of his suit jacket. It was a deliberate telegraphed movement designed to show he was not a threat. "Don't you do it!" Rourke screamed. His hand flew to his holster. In a split-second decision, perhaps the only one that saved Rourke from a murder charge that day, he bypassed his service weapon and ripped his taser from its holster. He leveled the yellow plastic weapon at Thorne's chest. The red laser dot danced on the lapel of Thorne's expensive Italian suit. "Hands up, hands in the air, or I will light you up," Rourke yelled. Thorne froze. His hand was inches from his lapel. He knew ballistics. He knew triggers. He knew that a taser could cause a heart attack, or that Rourke could easily switch to the Glock 19 on his hip if he panicked further. Thorne slowly raised his hands again higher this time. "Officer, listen to me very carefully. I am a senior federal prosecutor for the United States Department of Justice. My credentials are in this pocket. If you discharge that weapon, you will be assaulting a federal officer." Rourke hesitated for a fraction of a second. The words "federal prosecutor" hung in the air. But Rourke's bias was a powerful filter. It rejected the information instantly. A black man in a grocery store parking lot claiming to be a DOJ big shot, impossible. It was a bluff. It had to be a lie. "Yeah, and I'm the police commissioner." Rourke mocked, his finger tightening on the trigger. "You're a liar. You're resisting a lawful order. Get on the ground on your knees now." "I cannot get on the ground," Thorne stated. "I have bad knees, and this pavement is dirty. I am telling you again, verify my identity. Call your supervisor. Do not do this." "I'm done asking," Rourke said. He holstered the taser and surged forward. He had decided that physical force was the only language this suspect would understand. Thorne braced himself. He didn't fight back. He knew that would be a death sentence, but he didn't make it easy. He stood like a statue, rooted to the earth. Rourke grabbed Thorne's right arm and wrenched it behind his back. The force was unnecessary and excessive. Thorne felt the tendons in his shoulder strain, but he didn't cry out. He maintained a stoic silence. "You're under arrest for resisting obstruction and suspicion of auto theft." Rourke panted, struggling to maneuver the larger man. By now, the audience had grown. A circle of onlookers had formed. Phones were out. The red recording lights were blinking. The scene was being captured from at least 4 different angles. "Look at this," Rourke shouted to the crowd, trying to control the narrative even as he lost control of the situation. "This guy thinks he can refuse lawful orders. Back up, everyone, back up." Thorne spoke clearly, directing his voice not to Rourke but to the phones recording him. "My name is Marcus Thorne. I am a United States attorney. I am being arrested without cause at Oakwood Market. I am not resisting." "Shut up!" Rourke shoved Thorne forward, slamming his chest against the side of the Escalade. The sound of the impact, expensive fabric against expensive metal, was sickening. Rourke kicked Thorne's legs apart. "You're done talking," Rourke hissed in his ear. The metal handcuffs clicked ominously once, twice. Rourke ratcheted them tighter than regulation allowed, biting into Thorne's wrists. It was a petty, punitive move, a final assertion of dominance. Thorne stood pressed against his own car, his cheek resting against the cold glass of the rear window. He could see his groceries inside, the steaks, the bottle of red wine, the card he had bought for his wife. The indignity of it washed over him hot and sharp, but he pushed it down. He needed a clear head. He was already building the case file in his mind. Count 1, unlawful detention. Count 2, assault. Count 3, deprivation of civil rights under color of law. "You have the right to remain silent." Rourke began to recite the Miranda warning, rushing through the words as if they were a nuisance rather than a constitutional bedrock. Rourke spun Thorne around. He reached into Thorne's jacket pocket, the one Thorne had tried to access earlier. He pulled out a slim leather wallet. "Let's see who you really are," Rourke muttered. He didn't open it. He didn't look at the ID. He was so convinced that the wallet would contain nothing of value, or perhaps a fake ID, that he simply tossed it onto the passenger seat of his patrol car through the open window. "Hey," a woman from the crowd shouted. She was a middle-aged soccer mom type, holding her phone steady. "He told you who he was? Why don't you check his ID?" "Mind your business, lady, or you're next," Rourke threatened, pointing a finger at her. "This is public property." A man in a business suit chimed in. "We have a right to record. That man hasn't done anything wrong." "I'm securing the suspect," Rourke yelled. He grabbed Thorne by the upper arm and marched him toward the cruiser. Thorne walked with his head high despite the awkward angle of his arms. He didn't struggle. He didn't stumble. He walked with more dignity in handcuffs than Rourke had ever possessed in uniform. Rourke opened the back door of the cruiser and shoved Thorne inside. The space was cramped, the plastic seat hard and unyielding. Thorne had to twist his body to fit his long legs inside. Rourke slammed the door shut, sealing Thorne in the cage. As Rourke walked around to the driver's side, he looked up at the manager's office window. He gave a thumbs up. Silas Vance, watching from behind the glass, nodded back. They both thought they had won. They thought they had cleaned up the streets. Rourke slid behind the wheel. He was breathing heavy, the adrenaline rush fading into a smug satisfaction. He glanced in the rearview mirror at Thorne. "Comfortable back there, Mr. Prosecutor," Rourke taunted. Thorne met his eyes in the mirror. His expression was terrifyingly blank. "Officer," Thorne said softly, "I want you to remember this moment. I want you to remember exactly how you feel right now, because it is the last time in your life you will ever feel powerful." Rourke laughed. Yeah. Tell it to the judge." "I intend to," Thorne replied. "And I usually win." The drive to the precinct was short, less than 15 minutes. Rourke blasted the radio, trying to drown out the silence from the back seat. But the silence was heavy. It was the silence of a storm gathering on the horizon. The 12th Precinct station was a flurry of activity when Rourke marched Thorne through the double doors. Phones were ringing, officers were typing reports, and the smell of stale coffee hung in the air. Rourke paraded Thorne past the bullpen, hoping for high fives or nodding approval from his colleagues. Instead, he got curious glances. Why was Rourke bringing in a man in a $3,000 suit for an auto theft bust? They reached the booking desk. Sergeant Miller was on duty. Miller was 55, a dinosaur in the department with white hair and eyes that had seen everything. He was 3 months away from retirement and had zero tolerance for nonsense. Miller looked up from his paperwork. He looked at Rourke, sweaty and puffed up. Then he looked at Thorne, handcuffed, calm, and radiating an aura of absolute fury, restrained by discipline. "What do we have here, Rourke?" Miller asked, his voice gravelly. "Grand theft auto suspect resisting arrest, disorderly conduct?" Rourke rattled off. "Caught him at Oakwood Market. Guy was casing cars, refused to ID, got aggressive." Miller raised an eyebrow. He looked at Thorne. "Aggressive him. He refused lawful orders, Sarge," Rourke insisted. "I see," Miller said. He looked at Thorne. "Sir, do you have a name?" "My name is Marcus Thorne," he said clearly. "I am a senior prosecutor for the Department of Justice. My credentials are in the wallet that Officer Rourke threw onto the front seat of his vehicle without examining." The room went quiet. The typing stopped. 2 officers at a nearby desk turned around. Miller stared at Thorne. The name rang a bell. A loud bell. "Rourke," Miller said slowly, "where is the suspect's wallet?" "It's in the car. I didn't want him reaching for it. Said he had a badge or something. Probably a fake security guard shield." "Go get it," Miller ordered. "Now." Rourke rolled his eyes but turned to leave. "Wait," Miller said. "Unlock him first. Sarge, he's a suspect." "Unlock him," Miller barked. Rourke fumbled for his keys and undid the cuffs. Thorne brought his hands forward, rubbing his wrists. There were deep red indentations where the metal had dug in. Rourke went out to the car and returned 2 minutes later with the leather wallet. He tossed it on the high counter. "Here, let's see the federal agent ID." Miller picked up the wallet. He opened it. The first thing he saw was the gold shield. It wasn't a security guard badge. It was the heavy, intricately engraved badge of the United States Department of Justice. Next to it was a photo ID card, Marcus Thorne, Senior Assistant U.S. Attorney. Miller's face drained of color. He looked at the ID. He looked at Thorne. He looked at Rourke. "Rourke," Miller whispered, "you have got to be kidding me." "What? It's fake, right?" Rourke asked, his confidence wavering for the first time. Miller didn't answer. He picked up the phone and dialed a number he knew by heart, the liaison office for the Federal District Court. "This is Sergeant Miller at the 12th. I need a verification on a credential. Name is Marcus Thorne." There was a pause. Miller listened. His eyes closed briefly as if in pain. "Yes. Yes, he is here. Yes, I understand." Miller hung up the phone gently. He looked at Rourke with an expression of pity and disgust. "It's real," Miller said. "He is exactly who he said he was. He's the lead prosecutor for the organized crime strike force." Rourke's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The swagger evaporated instantly. Miller turned to Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, on behalf of this precinct, Save it, Sergeant." Thorne cut him off. "I want your captain, I want the chief, and I want this officer's badge number and chain of command documented immediately." The next hour was a blur of high-ranking brass descending on the precinct. The captain arrived within 20 minutes, breathless and looking as if he'd just swallowed a lemon. The chief of police was on the phone. Officer Rourke was sitting in a chair in the corner of the interrogation room, not as an interrogator, but as the subject of an internal affairs inquiry that had started 5 minutes ago. He looked small. The reality of what he had done was crashing down on him. He hadn't just arrested a black man, he had arrested a man who had the power to summon the FBI with a text message. Thorne sat in the captain's office nursing a cup of water. He had refused medical attention, though his wrists were swelling. He wanted the injuries documented by his own doctors. "Mr. Thorne," the captain said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This is a terrible misunderstanding. Officer Rourke is zealous. We can release you immediately, drop all charges, obviously. We can have a driver take you back to your car." Thorne set the water down. "Captain, do not insult my intelligence. This was not a misunderstanding. This was profiling, pure and simple. If I were white wearing that suit loading those groceries, Officer Rourke would have waved as he drove by. Instead, I was assaulted. We will handle this internally," the captain promised. "You will," Thorne agreed. "But I will handle it externally. I want my property returned. I want the body camera footage preserved. And I am leaving here to call my attorney." As Thorne walked out of the precinct, a free man, but a furious one, the internet was already doing its work. The video taken by the soccer mom had hit social media. It was titled "Cop Assaults DOJ Prosecutor for Shopping While Black." It had 50,000 views in the first hour. By the time Thorne got home to his wife, the anniversary dinner ruined the steaks likely spoiled in the impounded car. It had 1 million. The comments were a landslide of outrage. He showed his hands. He was calm. How does a cop not check ID before arrests? Fire him. Arrest him. The next morning, the press conference was not held by the police department. It was held by Marcus Thorne, standing on the steps of the federal courthouse, flanked by civil rights attorneys. His wrists were bandaged. "Yesterday," Thorne told the assembled bank of microphones, "I was reminded that no amount of education, no title, and no suit of clothes protects a black man from the presumption of guilt. Officer Rourke didn't see a prosecutor. He saw a predator. And because of that, he violated his oath." Back at the station, Rourke was called into the chief's office. He walked in a cop. He walked out a civilian. He was placed on unpaid suspension pending termination. His gun and badge were taken. As he walked to his personal car, he checked his phone. His face was everywhere. His name was a hashtag. The wheels of justice usually slow-moved with terrifying speed when the victim was one of their own. The lawsuit filed by Thorne against the city of Richmond, the police department officer Rourke, and Silas Vance and Oakwood Market's parent company was a masterclass in litigation. Thorne didn't just sue for wrongful arrest. He sued for deprivation of rights, defamation, assault, and battery. He subpoenaed Rourke's entire disciplinary history, exposing the 7 previous complaints that had been swept under the rug. He subpoenaed Silas Vance's call logs, proving a pattern of biased reporting. The city's lawyers took one look at the evidence, the video of Rourke screaming at a calm man, the refusal to check ID, the illegal tightness of the handcuffs, and raised the white flag. There was no defense. It was indefensible. 10 months later, the settlement was announced. The city of Richmond agreed to pay Marcus Thorne $4.1 million. Oakwood Market settled separately for an undisclosed sum, rumored to be in the high six figures, and announced a new nationwide training program on unconscious bias for all management staff. Kyle Rourke was fired. The police union, seeing the public tide, declined to fight for his job. He was decertified by the state board, meaning he could never work as a police officer again in the state. Last heard, he was working for a landscaping company in another county. Silas Vance was terminated from Oakwood Market the day the lawsuit was filed. He issued a tearful apology on social media, claiming he didn't mean any harm, but the internet is not forgiving. He remains unemployed in the retail sector. Marcus Thorne donated $1 million of his settlement to a legal defense fund for indigent defendants, people who get arrested just like he did, but who don't have a badge or a law degree to protect them. He returned to work at the DOJ, but things were different. He walked differently. The weight of the experience stayed with him. He had won, yes, but he had also lost. He had lost the illusion that he was safe. In the quiet of his office, looking out over the city, he served Thorne often thought about that afternoon. He thought about the fear he felt when the taser laser hit his chest. Not fear of the pain, but fear of the erasure. Fear that he would become just another hashtag, another unexplained tragedy, his life's work wiped away by a split-second decision of a man who refused to see him as a human being. This story ended with a payout and a firing, which is more justice than most receive. But money doesn't heal humiliation, and termination doesn't undo trauma. What happens when the next Officer Rourke pulls over someone who isn't a senior prosecutor? What happens when the victim is a teacher, a nurse, or a student? That is the question we must ask ourselves. We cannot wait for the victims to be powerful before we demand that the system be just. Whatever happened to innocent until proven guilty? Should officers be personally liable for civil rights violations? Drop your answers in the comments below. If you believe that stories like Marcus Thorne's need to be told, if you believe that shining a light on injustice is the first step toward fixing it, please like this video and share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe. We are building a community here that demands better. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and keep watching.